Hi everybody. I'm so sorry I'm late. Hey Red, how you doing? Thanks for holding down the fort while I got here. I'm so sorry I'm late, but I have a wonderful surprise. Even though I'm late, Soda has decided this is the time to come and see everyone. So we have him here with us, getting pets, demanding his appropriate amount of pets. Oh, Red, you are the best. Hi, Soda. This is going to make it hard to study if you decide to set yourself down here like this. No, come on. That's enough. How are you doing today, Red? I do not like the way my hair looks today. Hi, Soda. Hi, Soda. I think you guys are so sweet to put Miss Carrie Ann in my name. So, Soda, how long are you going to sit here and visit? You're going to get in the way. But everybody likes to see, yeah. Okay, that hurts now. No. Okay, that's enough now. That's enough now. We can watch Soda Cat like this. So, what we are studying today, the reason I was late is I was trying to print out the study guide and it was taking all manner of time to print. So, I'm sorry I was late. Soda. We're going to be reading about language change over time, which I think is going to be a really interesting article, or rather chapter. We have got several pages of study guide. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you for setting those up. I don't know if I'd even mentioned that I had a link tree. So thank you for catching that. Soda is definitely here to say hello. Can you hear him purring, Red? You've got my left breast and a whole lot of soda. Can you stop with my nose? Is that okay? Can you lick my hand? Okay, so key concepts in the chapter. Let me find the stapler. It is right there. And what this all has to say. "11 pages of a study guide." So we're going to start on the study guide, y'all. And then we'll move over to the chapter and see if we can get through it. Internal change is change resulting from a structural instability within the dialect itself, especially the vowel system. For example, in the variety that Sarah Palin speaks, because E and E have become homophonous in certain environments, that is, the distinction between them has been collapsed or lost, targets in the vowel space are shifting and other changes may occur or already be occurring. To use a different example, once speakers lose the distinction between ah and ah, dawn, don, not, caught, caught. This may trigger other shifts because it leaves a hole in the vowel space and creates a kind of asymmetry there. I assume most of you do not distinguish between these pairs of words. Janet Cole, who's from New York City, and I do. However, that we have very different realizations of the actual vowels we use in these words. External change. Change resulting from borrowing from an outside source, whether another variety of the same language or another. Examples of change triggered by contact with another language. English borrowed the phenome ing from the French during the Norman period. For example, the phoneme je from the French during the Norman period. For example, rouge and measure, although this was buoyed by internal change. Many American regional dialects have been influenced by the ad-straight languages spoken by immigrants. The very rounded and fronted pronunciation of O in Minnesota, as pronounced by the natives of the state, influenced by the realization of that sound in the Scandinavian languages of the immigrants who settled the state. English patterned the of genitive, a friend of mine, on the French use of de, of, as a way of marking possession. Old English used case markings to show the genitive, and that is the source of our way of marking the genitive with apostrophe S. All these words and expressions are borrowed from other languages. Khaki, algebra, binomial, schadenfreude, bon vivant, apostle, she, alto, bagel, kangaroo, tamale. Notice that we had to have borrowed the plural of this form and back-formed the singular. We've also borrowed expressions like "it goes without saying," which is borrowed from French "ça va sans dire," literally "it goes without to say." So, external change. Examples of change triggered by another variety of language. Example 8.1, the Queen's English and her move toward estuary English influenced by Cockney speech. Her speech has been influenced by other varieties of English over time. By the way, this is an example of what Leibov calls change from below, that is, change from below the level of consciousness. She surely doesn't realize this is happening. In this case, it also involves a change that originated in lower social classes and worked its way up the social ladder, but that's not the below part in this case. So we'll have to read about that example. The use of like as a quotative. She was like, I'm not going. or focus marker. I was like starving. As best we understand, this originated in California in the variety of English spoken by young women referred to locally as Valley Girls and is now used in varieties of English around the world by people of all ages. Evie, hi, how are you? It's nice to see you. I am looking through this 11-page study guide that the professor gave me before I'm going into the chapter, but it's 11 pages. I'm wondering, Soda is really affectionate. And then he's not, right? Like, then he's gone. He's done. That's my affection for the day. Have it or not, I will groom your nose. It must be done daily. My nose must be groomed daily. Okay. I don't think I'm going to try and read that whole. He's a cat. Indeed, he is. He is sitting right next to me in his cat bed now. What you doing, Soda? Grooming himself. He's got his left rear leg fully extended, and he is doing the cat thing. Licking his paws, cleaning his face. It's kind of adorable. So, language in time is the chapter this week. Language in time. So I think, let's see what this has to say. Let me break the book a little bit because it doesn't want to participate. It doesn't want to fully cooperate in letting me hold it properly. Our coverage of the I don't know about you guys. I always try to start reading without my reading glasses because, I sort of can, but then what happens is if I try to do that, my eyes get so tired so fast and then I can't read at all. So I'm trying to remember to put my reading glasses on because it does make a difference when they are on. Lori, how you doing? Pardon me, y'all. Pardon me. My client today wanted to go to Olive Garden, so we went to Olive Garden and had soup, salad, and breadsticks for lunch. And iceberg lettuce makes me belch. So I apologize, y'all. So we're talking chapter 8. Lori, 4 days off? What are you going to do with yourself, girl? I used to love that soup, Red, but it feels like it's all watered down and nasty nowadays. Lay around? That sounds like a good plan. That sounds like a good plan. You never get. I love their Suppa Toscana soup too, Red. That's why I go. But nowadays, it just feels like thin, thin broth. I I don't know if my taste buds have changed or they've changed the soup. But what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make some from scratch. It's frozen and microwaved. It's not as good. Okay. Not as good as it used to be. It's not as good as I remember it. So I tried the chicken and dumplings with gnocchi. And I didn't like that much either. It was too thick. It was too thick. But he came and saw I hadn't eaten any of my soup, so he adjusted the ticket and I only paid for salad and breadsticks. So that was great because it was $8.99 instead of $10.99. So I mean, it's only $3, but it was nice. I do love their salad. And their breadsticks, when they're fresh, are excellent. They're not so good when they're not fresh. So, you guys have got frozen stuff at our Olive Garden. That's just terrible. You made spaghetti? Good for you, Lori. I like... What kind of sauce do you like on your spaghetti, Lori? I like a nice ragu with meat sauce. I like either lamb shanks in my meat sauce. I'll take hamburger in a ragu if that's what I've got. I like, but I really, really like sausage in my spaghetti. Frozen stuff at Olive Garden. That's the worst. It's just, it tastes so thin. It's not as good as I remember it. And you get ragu and add some garlic. Yeah. You chopped up a bunch of veggies and hamburger into sauce. That sounds excellent. That's what I do when I'm really motivated. I toss some onions in and I saute those, and with onions and carrots and celery, and I saute that down nice. And then I cook up the hamburger and add some milk and saute that forever. And then I add some canned tomatoes. But yes, I have also been known to get ragu and put that in a pan with some garlic and just let it heat up on a slow oven for 45 minutes. And I'll tell you what, just letting that sauce simmer for a little while, maybe adding, I like to add about a half a teaspoon and a half of sugar to my ragu. It tends to round out the tomatoes. But then I tend to like things a little sweeter myself. It works. It does. It's like magic, isn't it, Red? You simmer it and yes, it does cut the acid. Exactly, Lori. Exactly. I also add sugar to my caramelized onions. It helps them caramelize a little bit. Simmering it makes it better, especially tomato sauce. Frozen stuff at Olive Garden. Well, one of my close friends is Italian from New York. New York. Italian from New York. And I used to make mine from scratch. I still do sometimes. It's not that hard. If I've got the ingredients in the house, but often I just buy the spaghetti sauce, because buying the spaghetti sauce is as easy as buying. It's like this. Why would I make a cake from scratch when it takes 10 times as much work as what I can get from Duncan Hines or Betty Crocker? And Duncan Hines and Betty Crocker come out perfect every time. So why would I bother to make from scratch? Not cakes. I'll make brownies from scratch. I'll make brownies from scratch. But I'm also the girl who's like, B's get degrees. So C's get degrees. Box cake is fine. Exactly. In fact, it's probably more consistent. Yeah, I don't know. You're not a from scratch person? Where'd your daughter get it? That's why she's an overachiever? That's funny. My mom made everything from scratch when I was a kid. Okay. Let's try and... Her father is an excellent cook. Oh, that's nice. So that's where your son and... That's nice. My husband's an excellent cook too. My dad was a good cook. I like it when men cook. Men should cook. All men should know how to cook and clean and do their laundry and change a diaper. Just like all girls should know how to drive a clutch, change a tire, change their oil. Those are just normal things that every child should know. Our coverage of the basics of the variationist approach in Chapter 7 sets the scene for a focus in Chapters 8 and 9 on the sociolinguistics of time and space, twin parameters that are as interconnected in social and linguistic life as they are in theoretical physics. Yes, time to study, Red. The study of linguistic change was primary in Lebov's research from the 70s, and an interest in the intersection of language and place developed soon after, particularly in Treadgill's work. I'm feeling like you guys are coming at me all cattywampus. In Treadgill's work, the emphasis has been on change in the sound systems of language varieties, on how pronunciations shift in response to community internal factors or as a result of external contact with other communities. Sociolinguists have concentrated on the language correlates of two of the ways humans experience time: age and change. After introducing the sociolinguistics of age, this chapter covers the study of language change as it is generated inside speech communities, that is, its innovations that arise spontaneously from among the speakers themselves. Dubois and Horvath distinguish these from adoptions from outside, and the next chapter deals with how contact with other dialects and languages may introduce changes to a local vernacular. local vernacular. The distinction between internal and externally driven change remains, however, an idealized one, since both kinds of change are often going on at the same time in the same place. Age in language. Together with gender, age is the most fundamental social factor structuring any study of language variation. Yet Kuplin's claim that age is sociolinguistics' underdeveloped social dimension still holds by comparison with class, ethnicity, and gender, the other players in the usual quartet of social variables. Mandy, how are you doing? How is LA? You're still at Disney? Am I the most fun thing to watch at Disney, girl? Don't you have better things to do than come watch my sociolinguistics stream? Not that I'm complaining. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here. I'm really looking forward to if you make it to Big Blue, Mandy. I know you don't want to protest if things are crazy, and I can completely understand that. But I think it'll still be fun for you to get to stop in and meet people if it's not crazy. Age cannot be crudely equated with physical biological characteristics, although sociolinguistics has been slow to reflect this. Chambers, for example, writes, "Our ages remained fixed. Age plays an almost autocratic role in our social lives. There is no denying the physical dimension, most obvious at the youngest and oldest stages of life, with initial growth from infant to adult and eventual decline from health to death. But age is not controlled by chronological time. It has social and psychological dimensions. It is structured and conceived differently by different cultures and different individuals. Age interacts with other social characteristics, with gender in several examples in the previous chapter, the use of ing in a college fraternity, African American youth vernacular, the shift from women's to men's language by Yaniua boys. There can be a strong and specific linguistic opportunities or limitations for particular age, gender groups in a society. For example, for young females versus male. Such sociolinguistic expectations usually police young women's usage of non-standard or taboo language. I don't know how to use captions, Mandy. How do I turn on captions? I don't think I can either. I'm looking. Nope, it says unavailable. I have no idea how to turn them on, Mandy. Paolo! Hi! You haven't found anything for YouTube, which makes it not accessible for lots of people. I usually just use my live captions from my phone. I'm sorry, Mandy. If there is a way that I can do the captions, please tell me. I don't see it through YouTube or from StreamYard. That's unfortunate, Mandy. YouTube needs to get on that. I thought they were just, when I went to transcribe from Pearl Snappy's stream and from Liz's stream and Selfless Self, they all had captions. I don't know if my old ones have captions or not. Time for coffee? Okay, exercise 8.1. Corpus linguistics is an approach on the edge of sociolinguistics which collects and analyzes very large samples, or corpora, often millions of words, of spoken or written language representing, for example, the state of British English in a given period. The amount of data means that social or contextual information is often limited and analysis focus on features that can be computer searched. Barbieri, in 2008, analyzed 400,000 words of transcribed conversations from a 90s corpus of American English, which split between younger, 15 to 25, and older, 35 to 60 speakers. Words that were used very significantly more by younger speakers include the F word in its standard ing and ed form, cool, and man and dude, mainly as address terms. Who would think it was a pizza without the crust, man? That would be a bummer, dude. Hi, Miss Sunrise Dawn. How are you? How are you? In a parallel study, Precht found that such items are also more frequently used by men than women, showing that younger males are the prime users of slang and taboo words. Then they give a lot of things to do. I am middling. I am really anxious about this upcoming paper. I need to do a lot more work on it, but I needed to read the chapter because class is tomorrow. I've got the rest of the week. No, I've got tomorrow. I've got to be up, and I have to pick up my client at 5:45 tomorrow morning because they have a medical procedure that I need to take them for. So they have an appointment I need to go take them to. So I need to get this chapter read and get to bed at like 8 tonight because I've got to be up at 5 tomorrow morning. Age also interacts with ethnicity or class. Very group-specific class, age, ethnicity, gender codes are well known, as shown in Chapter 6's great case study of Giria, spoken by poor young black men in Rio. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this, Paolo. Are you still here? Paolo? Chapter 6. No captions on live recordings until it's over. Paolo, see this? You're still in a great mood after getting to see the baby on the ultrasound and hear their heartbeat. That's so exciting. And how are you going to know the gender? Did they do an amnio? Or are you going to get another ultrasound? Okay, if Paolo's not here, we're not going to go back to Bria slang because I can't do that. We need to get through the chapter. How long is the chapter? Okay, 22 pages. They did a blood test on the baby or on your daughter? They can do a blood test to find out the sex of the baby? That's amazing. Almost 30 pages, y'all. Let's get to it. The concept of the lifespan recognizes that there are identifiable socially constructed age stages. That is really amazing, Dawn. Wow. I didn't know we had that technology. That's really cool. That's really cool. The concept of the lifespan recognizes there are identifiable socially constructed age stages. Childhood as a different stage of life is a... Guys, check this out on YouTube. I am not getting any studying done, you guys. Good. You want to get tested for those too, for sure. For sure, you want to get tested for those. There it is. So, according to YouTube, I need 200 watch hours. See? If you look at all the watch hours for 365 days, it's at 2803. Isn't that cool? You think they appear after the live? That's unfortunate. If I look at Become a YouTube Partner page, it's 2700. But that's just the 5-day difference between the date. Yeah, almost there. We are getting closer and closer. Red, you missed it yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Scotch made a surprise entrance. Childhood as a different stage of life is a relatively modern Western concept, and the teenager was invented in the 1950s. The graying of society has led to a distinction between the young old and the old old, and often diverging life chances for the elderly of different social classes. Sociolinguistic behavior and capability are played out differently across the life course. Childhood. studies of the sociolinguistic competence of children show that they learn some linguistic variation by 3 years and a good deal of social and stylistic competence by 10. The flip side of this is that while children age 9 can fully learn the dialect of a new region, those over 13 fail to do so. The language of the young merits attention in its own right, not just as a precursor to linguistic adulthood. Adolescence. In Western societies, the teenage years are a time of rich sociolinguistic creativity and innovation, as the case study in section 8.7 shows. Teenagers are also often regarded as the home base of the vernacular. It seems that enduring adult patterns of speech are laid down by the late teens. Adulthood. You missed Scotch too? Yeah, he made a secret appearance. Y'all. He spoiled my surprise. Okay, maybe that's a little better. Adulthood. We know more about the speech of adults than any other group, and often their language has been treated as the norm against which youth and age are measured. But conversely, adults sometimes appear in the research as the colorless default case, those who are just using language rather than learning it or losing it. Kristen, how are you? It's good to see you. Welcome in. We are just doing a study stream. We're talking about language in time and the sociolinguistic life course. I find it really interesting that we've got childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and old age. So people who are old are not adults somehow. There have been hundreds of studies on youth language, but little focus on linguistic variation in old age. Coupland argues that this reflects Western phobia against aging and the aged. Variationist sociolinguistics has tended to utilize older speakers as time capsules of the speech of earlier decades, implying they are out of tune with the mainstream current culture. And with that, y'all, look at who we have. Come here. Come here. Oh, no, you're not going to come here. You're going to decide that I'm scary. Okay, come here. She wants a baby too. Oh, that's so sweet. You'll have to get her a baby doll at the same time her niece is born. A central issue of the sociolinguistics of age is whether adults change their language during their life course. If basic sociolinguistic patterns are settled before age 20, do they remain stable? Individual changes across the lifespan would be reflected in age-graded patterns of a speech sample in a community. Different age groups would behave differently, but each generation would be repeating the same pattern as the previous one. If we had recorded young people of the last generation as well as young people from the present generation, they would sound the same. Such differences between age groups, age grading, have been found, but not often. They tend to follow one of two patterns. In the first, younger people use more non-standard forms, but then adopt the standard as they move into adulthood. The second pattern is when the youngest and oldest groups both use more non-standard forms, while the middle age use less. Cases are in fact rather rare, but one was found in our work in New Zealand. Pakeha, Anglo men, showed just this kind of age dip for the ing variable. 56% non-standard in for the young, dropping to 32% for the middle-aged, and back up to 51% for older speakers. Middle-class women had a similar dip, but at a lower frequency, 16 to 4 to 24. Abstracted, the pattern looks like this. This U shape is usually interpreted as a life course phenomenon. When people are out and about in the workforce and society during their middle adult years, they require more standard language than earlier or later in their life, when general social advancement matters less. This is the monolingual equivalent of what can be seen in bilingual communities, where speakers who have been required to use a majority language throughout their working lives may revert to their minority language again when they get older. Lifespan change has showed up in a series of meticulous studies of Montreal French by Gillian Sankoff and her colleagues. Using a panel of the same 60 speakers recorded first in 1971 and again in 1984, they have tracked the alternation between the periphastic future, like going to in English, and the inflected future. The researchers anticipated their speakers' usage would be stable across their lifespan. However, they found the contrary. In the 13 years between the two recordings, 2/3 increased their use of the inflected future. And out of the 20 speakers who used no inflected future at all in 1971, 16 had adopted it by 1984. The change was class specific. The low socio-professional status group showed no shift, but most of the high status speakers, 18 out of 21, used more inflectional futures in 1984. This is a striking lifespan change that is clearly much more dynamic for speakers than the standard label age grading implies. We will return to its implications in the next section. So this table shows the use of inflected future in Montreal French by 21 individuals from the high socio-professional status group, showing their shift between 1971 and 1984. Okay, real time and apparent time. In earlier chapters, we looked at language change in the sense of shift from the use of one language to another, Samoan to English, for example. Then, investigating pidgins and creoles, we saw how social upheaval can create new languages from old in a century or less. We also know that change in even apparently stable languages has left modern speakers of English or French or German unable to understand the language of their ancestors of a millennium ago. The variationist study of change in individual linguistic variables over time is the focus of the rest of this chapter. Wow, 8 of you reading along with me? That's so nice. I appreciate it. Make sure and give the video a like or dislike if you don't like it. Welcome in here to the Corner Joint, where we do some studying. We do some chit-chatting get-together, and we do a little bit of protesting when I get the time. We go down to the Portland, Oregon, make them pull their shades. The ruse of apparent time. The ideal in studying language is change is to catch it as it is happening in real time. That is, to have records of communities' speech in the past as well as the present. Table 8.1a shows how such a study could have looked in 2010. 3 generations, each recorded as a 25-year-old adults in 1960, 1985, and 2010. But there is clearly a problem. We are conducting our study in 2010. We have no earlier recordings and cannot time travel back half a century. Nor can we afford to just record today's 25-year-olds and then wait until 2060 to compare them with their grandchildren. Project funders want rather more immediate results. Until the 1960s, the received wisdom in linguistics was that language change could not be directly observed as it happened. Leibov's solution to that is exemplified in Table 8.1b. Column 4 differs from 8.1a in that all the recordings were made in 2010. Okay, so here's the idea, guys. In column 8.1, you would have to record in 60, 85, and 2010. Or you can record everybody in 2010 with the assumption that their language had solidified by the time they were 25. So that is the idea. The older age group are taken to represent the state of language 2 generations back. Whew. The middle age group represent 1 generation ago, and the youngest group speak the language of now. The older and mid-age groups are therefore treated as linguistic archives for their generations, G1 and G2. This is current time projected back to represent prior times. Leibov called it apparent time, in which the present is used to explain the past. But the ruse of apparent time raises 2 issues. It relies wholly on the assumption that people continue to speak similarly throughout their adult lives. That the speech of the middle and older generations has not changed significantly in the intervening 25 to 50 years since they were themselves 25 years old. Secondly, if we depend on age to benchmark change, how do we tell the difference between what is age grading and what is generational change? Both show up as regular increases and or decreases in use of a feature according to age. To take the second issue first, disambiguating age stratified findings has been a central interpretive puzzle for every variationist project, and there is only one sure solution to it. There's only one sure solution to it: calibrate against real-time data. Most of the studies of the 60s and 70s were in fact conducted in communities where there existed prior descriptions of speech, albeit of varying detail and reliability. Often, oh my goodness, you guys. Often derived from dialect geographical surveys of a generation or 2 before. See Chapter 9. That is how Leibov benchmarked his findings in New York, as did Trudgill in Norwich. More tellingly, there is now enough time depth to replicate the 1960s and 70s studies and calibrate the apparent time interpretations the original researchers made then against real-time results. There have been perhaps a score of such studies, and these we now turn And to these we now turn to address the age grade versus change puzzle. Robert, that's not helping. That's not helping. I know I'm yawning my head off. Now I'm going to yawn when I think about it. You saw me do it? Yeah. I was trying to hide it. How are you doing today? I did not go watch that rain video, Robert. You just came in when I did that. I am sorry to greet you with a yawn, Robert. I've just got the yawns today. There it is. Frog on the kitchen window. Yeah, it's just a lovely sound. And there's the vet. There's the vet. In generational change, the new generation speaks differently from the last. The language as a whole changes. In age grading, the community's language as a whole does not change. Apparent time interprets age differentiated data as indicating generational change. How then do apparent time conclusions fare when tested against later real time data? Do they show generational change in real time? Sankoff overviewed 13 studies which claimed to have found change in apparent time and had since been replicated with the trend re-studies, that is, with the same population being resampled. Covering 10 countries and 7 languages, these confirmed that there had indeed been continuing change. Again, Guy Bailey and his colleagues compared a study of 13 sociolinguistic variables of Texas English with earlier dialect geography data. Their apparent time interpretations of the original data were all confirmed by the latter survey as real-time changes. Camaro, pardon me. I am so sorry. It's a Camaro. I apologize. That was bad of me. Camaro, not a vet. Lebov's early projects have also been replicated. See exercise 7.1 for the New York department store study and exercise 8.3 for research on Martha's Vineyard. As long as I didn't call it a Mustang. I'm sorry for calling it a Corvette. Thank you for giving me a bye. Such trend studies can confirm in real time that the community's language is changing. But identifying if individuals are changing during their lifespan, our first question earlier, requires a panel of speakers from the original survey who are later re-recorded for comparison with their younger selves. In one study, Sankoff and Blondeau analyzed shift in pronunciations of R by their 1971-1984 panel of Montreal speakers. A majority remained stable in their usage across their lifespan, which accords with Sankoff's study of a dozen other panel studies. 2 Camaros, not at once read. But although stability across the lifespan is the prevailing trend, an 87 and a 93. Lovely. But although stability across the lifespan is the prevailing trend, there is a strong countercurrent. Many of these studies also show a majority of speakers who do change across the lifespan. Some of their changes are major, and some of the minorities who change are substantial, a third of the sample. Usually the lifespan changes are in the same direction as any community changes, as Sankoff and Blondeau found for Montreal are. That kind of result implies that apparent time underestimates the rate of change. But the lifespan change toward the inflectional future that we saw in figure 8.1 was going in the opposite direction to the general community trend in Montreal, which is toward increased use of the alternative periphrastic future. In this case, then, lifespan change is retarding the wider community change, meaning that apparent time interpretation would have overestimated the rate of change. Example 8.1. In 1952, Queen Elizabeth II delivered the first of her many Christmas broadcasts to the Commonwealth. Australian phoneticians have taken the archive of the Queen's annual messages and compared her speech of the 50s with the 80s. They're finding there has been a drift in the Queen's accent towards one that is characteristic of speakers who are younger and or lower in the social hierarchy. Although she remained well behind the trend, most of the Queen's vowels had shifted about halfway towards the younger Cockney-influenced received pronunciation, which is sometimes called estuary English. Her Christmas broadcasts provide a wonderfully customized archive for tracking real-time change in one individual's language. High-quality annual recordings with the same theme, setting, genre, and audience. Queen Elizabeth is arguably the very last speaker of English we would expect to change her speech during her lifetime. What does this mean for our assumptions on age grading and apparent time? The real-time findings, therefore, show that many adults can and do shift their speech patterns during their lives, which supports Copeland's. I don't know if it said she wrote her. She might. It wouldn't surprise me. Let me read it again, Wolf. In 1952, Queen Elizabeth II delivered the first of her many Christmas broadcasts to the Commonwealth. Australian phoneticians have taken the archive of the Queen's annual messages and compared her speech of the 50s with the 80s. They're finding there has been a drift in the Queen's accent towards one that is characteristic of speakers who are younger and or lower in the social hierarchy. Although she remained well behind the trend, most of the Queen's vowels had shifted about halfway towards the younger Cockney-influenced received pronunciation, which is sometimes called estuary English. Her Christmas broadcasts provide a wonderfully customized archive for tracking real-time change in one individual's language. High-quality annual recordings with the same theme, setting, genre, and audience. Interesting, Wolf. The language shift could be changes in speech. Yes, but they're talking more about her vowels shifting, not her words. They're talking about her vowels shifting to different vowels. Orion, leave it. Leave. Bring it here. Come on. Bring it here. If it's so important, you have to have it to chew on. Bring it here. Come on. The real-time findings, therefore, show that many adults can and do shift their speech patterns during their lives, which supports Copeland's contention that even the most conservative of older speakers should not be treated as fossilized. On the other hand, that a majority of adults do not shift lends to apparent time both qualified legitimate. Hey, out. The fact that a majority of adults do not shift lends to apparent time both qualified legitimation and continued usefulness. And most of the changing minority shifts go along with community-wide change, confirming that apparent time is a reliably conservative technique for projecting change. But the counter cases mean that each variable has to be interpreted on its merits. And increasingly, it seems that lifespan changes may often ride on an underlying pattern of community change for the same linguistic variable. The linguistics of language change. The empirical foundations for a theory of language change were laid out by a long article with that title, authored by Uriel Weinreich and his students Leibov and Marvin Herzog in 1968. They stressed that, in contrast to the prevailing theories, language does not have to be homogeneous to be orderly and structured. They identified 5 problems for a theory of language change. Constraints. Do changes take some linguistic direction and not others? Transition. What intervening stages do changes pass through? How are they transferred between speakers? Embedding. Where is a change situated in linguistic and social structure? Evaluation. How is a change evaluated socially and communicatively? Actuation. What triggers and advances a specific change linguistically and socially? Why did this particular change occur here and now and not there and then? The perhaps unanswerable question. Do you want to see your audience? Or are you just going to sit there and look funny? Come here. You're not going to come up here because I sit here and clip your nails. I sit here and give you scritches too. There's 13 people in the chat who would love to see you. Yeah. You want to come on up for a treat? Let's try it and see what happens. Come on. Come on up here. Hey, Lisa. Good to see you. Come here. Okay, it's all here. Waiting for you. The empirical illustrations in this 1968 article were largely from Leibov's New York City research. His 3-volume life's work, Principles of Linguistic Change, returns to these original issues throughout. These books incorporate a lot of material from Leibov's main publications over several decades, and here I generally reference the book, not the original article. Orion is bummed. Yes. I am bummed. It's supposed to rain for the next week. Yes, we're fine, Dawn. We are fine. But here comes Orion. He got a treat. Phonology has been the home base of the variationist study of language change for some obvious reasons. Most phonological variables occur frequently in speech, sometimes many times per minute, while non-phonological variables can be rare. Also, the traditional definition of a sociolinguistic variable requires a closed set of two or more variants that mean the same thing. This is much more plausible in phonology. Singing equals singing. Singing equals singin' than in discourse or syntax. Discourse is the level of language structure above the sentence, while syntax is structure within the sentence. Orion. 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 Hold on a second, guys. Love you too, Sunrise Dawn. The constraints on defining variables have meant that most studies of variation and change in discourse and syntax have dealt with quite micro features, such as a single function word, rather than those, for example, involving changes in word order. But this does not prevent us investigating sociolinguistic changes in discourse patterns in a more qualitative way. Change in communication technologies have always tended to lead to new linguistic patterns, and the language of news has changed markedly in the past 100 years. The adoption of the inverted pyramid structure of news stories in the 20th century was the most significant of these shifts. That's what it was, Wolf. That's what it was. No, he was barking at hubby and youngest who got home at the same time. The inverted pyramid means that the most important thing is placed first in the story rather than the chronologically first fact. In a project of my own on news discourse, I took as a case study the reporting of polar expeditions across the 20th century. In January 1912, Captain Scott and his companions reached the South Pole only to die on the return journey. The news took over a year to reach the world because the continent was inaccessible until the relief ship got through from New Zealand the following Antarctic summer. The news was published in February 1913 in the New Zealand Herald, the country's largest daily, with a 10-deck headline, figure 8.2, which virtually tells the story. Nearly a half-century later, when the next overland expedition reached the pole, the news of Sir Edmund Hillary's arrival was broadcast on radio and published in the Herald the next morning. In 1999, when Sir Edmund's son Peter arrived at the pole after a 3-month trek, He was interviewed live on New Zealand Evening Television News. So there it is. Death in Antarctic. Fate of Captain Scott and party. Thrilling official narrative. Misfortune follows misfortune. Evans dies from accident. Gates severely frostbitten. Dies that others... See, this is why... guys, I need to remember to put my reading glasses on. Dies that others might proceed in a blizzard for 9 days. Shortage of fuel and food. A depot only miles away. Changes in communications technology across the century, therefore, exponentially reduced the time lapse between the event and its reporting and helped trigger changes in news discourse, syntax, and lexicon. One issue with such changes is how functional they are. That is, do they make the language more communicatively efficient? This is a question for all language change, with Leibov being at least being skeptical about the importance of functionalism as a driver of change. Variationist sociolinguistics. Hold on. Variationist sociolinguistics has concentrated its syntactic analysis on easily delimitable features like negatives, example, English never for not, double negatives, relative or demonstrative pronouns, and verb morphology such as marking number, she were here, person, I is coming, or tense, he bring it last night. Often these have been examined as contrasting standard and non-standard alternatives. See the list in the last chapter and the inventory of forms in Wolfram and Schilling Estes. One example comes from Centuries of Change in French. While Old French marked negation with ne before the verb, in the 14th to 16th centuries, pas was added after the verb, giving the canonical contemporary standard form, ils ne travaillent pas le lundi. They don't work on Monday. They negative work negative on Monday. Historical research by Martin Allen Mongeon shows that after 2 centuries of stable use of ne pas, the syntax began changing again in the 19th century. The lower social strata led a move to delete the original ne marker. By the late 20th century, this shift was well advanced in France, but still socially stratified. A study by Ashby in 1981 showed that the working class had far more deletion than the middle class. Clear age differentiation with 81% ne deletion by the younger cohort compared to 48% for the older reflected the continuing change and was later confirmed by real-time data. In Quebec, ne has all but disappeared from spoken French in the 21st century, and the one-time newcomer pas serves as the sole marker. There is also now no social stratification for ne deletion in Quebec. A typical pattern as change moves to completion. Sound change has been the central occupation of variationist sociolinguistics. Nearly half the articles in the journey Language Variation and Change in the 10 years to 2008 dealt exclusively with phonetic variables. Vowel change has been Leibov's particular pursuit and dominates his 3-volume work just as his work dominates the field. Change in consonants often involves phonetic weakening or lenition. In Spanish and Portuguese, the plural is worked by a word final S, but is often reduced to an H or deleted altogether. Las cosas bonitas, la cosa bonita, the beautiful things. Such deletions often affect the morphology of a language as well as its phonology. It seems communicatively logical that when the plural is marked multiple times, say on article, noun, and adjective as in the example, that one or two of these might drop out. After all, only the first is necessary. That would be a functional explanation, but it is not what happens. Rather, marking on one item triggers more marking on subsequent items, and lack of marking triggers more non-marking. This is one of the evidences that leads Leibov to argue that most changes are counterfunctional. They do not enhance communication. In the UK, a suite of consonant changes is spreading London pronunciation, like th fronting, think, final L vocalization, milk, and T glottalization, butter. Received pronunciation has incorporated several of these, produced the estuary English, which we have seen the Queen accommodating to. As well as crossing social space from working class speech into the pan-regional prestige variety RP, these changes are also spreading geographically outwards from London. Vowel change. Vowels are the core of what we recognize as an accent, but the phonetics of vowel change is probably the most technically challenging area of linguistics we will touch on in this book, and I will not attempt to go into it in any depth. Most analysis nowadays is carried out instrumentally, feeding the sound signal through a computer program which enables precise measurement of the acoustic formants that characterize vowels. This is followed by normalization to allow for the different vocal tract sizes between females and males. The resulting formant values are then usually plotted on a grid that resembles the traditional vowel chart representing the position of the tongue on the mouth. So these are the vowel charts. And that's the front of the mouth and the top. That's the bottom. That's the back top, and that's the back bottom. If that makes any sense at all. The phonetic instrumentation has been accomplished by increasing statistical sophistication in both computing and displaying sociolinguistic data. Much of this work is linguistic rather than sociolinguistic in focus. Sometimes termed sociophonetics, it majors on the linguistics of sound variation and change, with less attention to its social dimension. The phonetics of vowel chain focuses on two main areas, mergers and chain shifts. Mergers occur when two vowel phonemes come to occupy the same phonetic space and so become one pronounced identically. Mergers routinely move in social and geographical as well as phonetic space. In contemporary English, the increasing merger between words like caught and caught, the largest single phonological change taking place in American English, is associated with the coal mining areas of Pennsylvania. Mergers are supposed to be generally not socially salient, Although in New Zealand the merger of ear and air vowels does give rise to self-aware wordplay in names such as hair say and hair today for hairdressing salons. Splits are the opposites of mergers are much less commonly reported. There is also the phenomenon of near mergers, which I will cover in chapter 10.3. You guys got quiet all of a sudden. Change shifts are the second main focus of research and occur when more than one adjacent vowel moves. If the pronunciation of one vowel begins to encroach on another vowel space, the second vowel must itself move if it is to remain distinctive. This sets off a push chain. A drag or pull chain is when a vowel shifts into the space vacated by another vowel. Much of Lebov's work has focused on trying to deduce patterns and formulate principles for vowel shifts, and Lebov closes with a dozen such principles for the phonetics of sound change. The most researched and publicized change shift is the so-called Northern Cities change shift, which has spread throughout an area of the inland northeastern United States, largely delimited by the westward extent of 19th century migration flows. Figure 8.3a shows Lebov's representation of the general trend of these shifts, with 6 vowels rotating clockwise. This clean pattern does, however, involve a high level of abstraction from the actual phonetic data. Matthew Gordon researched the shift in Michigan. He believes that the much more multidirectional pattern shown in figure 8.3b gives a truer picture and questions how much of this should be construed as a single change shift. There is some risk of ad hoc reasoning and overgeneralization in the search for broad principles of sound change. One of the central questions in the study of sound change is whether it spreads regularly across all words or by lexical diffusion, that is, word by word. We return to this in the next chapter. Y'all with me? The social life of language change. Okay. So much for the what of language change, but how and why does change proceed socially? Lebov, Orion. Lebov displaces the perhaps unanswerable why question into a search for who. Who are the leaders of change and what are their social characteristics? Most often they have proven to be located at the intersection of class and gender. Relatively little has been made of the role of ethnicity. Major theory generating projects in Philadelphia, Belfast, and Detroit have been mono-ethnic. Lebov's work on the Northern Cities shift set aside consideration of African Americans and Hispanics as being on separate trajectories of change and found European ethnic differences to have relatively little effect. But we know that ethnicity can be a major force in linguistic change, and in contact situations, it is crucial. Class. A basic distinction is made between change from above and change from below a speech community's level of consciousness. Speakers are aware of some changes, but not of others. The classic case of change from above is New York City R, which we discussed in the last chapter. New Yorkers are very aware of this variable and its social meaning, thanks Wolf, and this is reflected in the lower middle class crossing over to exceed the upper middle class. Changes from above the level of consciousness are also those that are led from above in society. Such changes appear to be rare and import a prestige form that is external to the community. Otherwise, the upper classes do not innovate linguistically. The queen shows up as a tardy follower of change rather than a leader. Similarly, Leibov found in Philadelphia that the upper class speak a conservative but distinctly Philadelphian variety of English and follow trends that are set by the working class and the lower middle class. Most changes then are below the level of a community's consciousness and also come from lower down the social scale. Leibov deduces the principle that most change originates in the center of the social hierarchy. This produces a characteristic curvilinear graph in which an incoming peak is at its peak in these socially central classes, with lower values in the trailing lower and upper classes. Hi. Come here. You getting brave? No. Come on. In the 70s, Leibov and his colleagues conducted a comprehensive study of the vowel systems of Philadelphia. They found changes occurring in many of the vowels, and particularly new and vigorous changes in the diphthongs of words like mouth and face. Crunchies, exactly. These displayed the typical curvilinear shape, with change being led from the upper working class. The same pattern is showed up in widely different languages and locations. The lentition of ch from affricate to fricative in word like muchos in the Spanish of Panama City, and the palatalization of T and D before front vowels in the Arabic of Cairo. Change affects all languages, and this includes sign languages as well as spoken. Communicatively, sign languages function like any spoken language, and linguistically, their structure and variation can be analyzed using similar frameworks. Socially, they have borne perhaps even greater discrimination than spoken minority languages. However, they are now publicly recognized in a number of countries, none more so than American Sign Language, which has been heavily researched over the past 50 years, especially at Guadalajara University in Washington. Signs can be described linguistically as sequences of hold and movement segments, with each segment consisting of features such as hand shape and location. The standard or citation form for the sign deaf in ASL starts with the index finger pointing upwards near the ear, then moving across the cheek to the corner of the mouth. The main non-standard form moves in the opposite direction, from mouth to ear. Interesting. ASL shows a great deal of variation. A nationwide study found that age and region were the most significant variables affecting the sign deaf. Figure 5.8 shows the verbal weights for deaf in 4 of the regional varieties of ASL. The pattern in the graph looks typical of the U shape that reflects age grading as shown in section 8.1. That is, younger and older signers use more non-standard forms than the middle-aged use fewer. The researchers, however, advance a different and very specific community-based explanation. This is linguistic change that reflects shifts in deaf education. The oldest signers had their schooling at a time when ASL was suppressed and they had no contact with the standard form. The middle-aged were schooled when awareness of ASL was heightened and standards prescribed. By the time of the youngest signers, the language's standing was secure enough to no longer be threatened by the use of non-standard forms. Therefore, imposed on chronological age, we see a very specific social and psychological history of ASL, which results in different generations of signers having different experiences and linguistic patterns. In the previous chapter, we saw how there are regular differences between women and men in cases of stable linguistic variation. Men prefer the non-standard variant and women the standard, very clearly in the case study of Ing. It is no surprise then to find women and men playing different roles in language change. Gender has to be arguably the most significant factor affecting change, and Leibov has derived principles to explain it. In linguistic change from above, women adopt prestige forms at a higher rate than men. In linguistic change from below, women use higher frequencies of innovative forms than men do. These principles mean that women lead in both forms of change, conscious and unconscious, which creates the gender paradox. Women conform more closely than men to sociolinguistic norms that are overtly prescribed, but conform less than men when they are not. Leibov canvasses several explanations for the gender mix of linguistic conformity and nonconformity, but considers them inconclusive. Such generalizations are clearly perilous, particularly in the light of the critiques we saw in Chapter 7.5 of the conceptualization of gender and variation of social linguistics, of women's conformity, and of definitions for what is standard and what is prescribed. Chi Chicana, how you doing? It is good to see you. We are just studying the effects of time on language, or language over time. And it is not the most exciting chapter I have ever read. That is for dang sure. I will take all the support I can, though. I am happy to see you too. It's been a while. How are things going? Yeah, exactly. Gotta know it, though. Gotta know it. However, the lead role of women in change is well evidenced in many studies, several of which we have touched on already for other purposes. Women are leading men. Oh, gee, really? Santa Rosa is beautiful. You're going to go shut down the mission? That's excellent. Are you going to live stream it? Hey, Oregon Valley girl, we are all doing great. We are about halfway through this chapter, and I don't think we're going to finish it in the next 20 minutes. And I've only got about 20 minutes. My youngest has got a concert tonight that shh, I forgot about it. Shh, don't tell anybody. I forgot about it. So I need to go do that tonight. So I'm really glad. Gee, I always think of Chica Cherry Cola. What did I remember? Retired Red, why are your lips sealed? However, the lead role of women in change is well evidenced in many studies, several of which we have touched on already for other purposes. Women are leading men in the adoption of R in New York and in the deletion of ne in the French negation discussed in section 8.3. In Cajun English, women are very far advanced of the men in aspirating stops. In the Spanish of Buenos Aires, the thing I didn't forget. Thanks, G. That's great. That's very excellent. Oh, I remembered. I did remember. I remembered in time. Figure in Spanish of Buenos Aires, the j in words like llama is being devoiced to ch. Llama is being devoiced to ch. Figure 8.6 shows that women are all a full generation ahead of men in this change. The women's line in the graph reflects what is known as the S-curve, a common pattern of change. That is, the change is relatively slow at the beginning, the line is quite flat at the bottom, speeds up in the middle stages, the line gets generally steeper, and then slows down again towards the end. The line flattens near the top. There is said line, devoicing of ch in Buenos Aires Spanish by age and gender. Percentage devoiced, age, and gender. Lebov's quest has been to locate the leaders of linguistic change, the who question posed earlier. In Philadelphia, he identifies the working class neighborhood. It's the first Minnesota goodbye, y'all. The working class neighborhood of Kensington is the crucible of change, and a category of speakers who take the lead role. It's going to be, in less than 2 weeks, we will have a Minnesota goodbye icon, guys. I'm so excited. Their distinguishing characteristic is nonconformity in both general and linguistic behavior. They are women and their archetype is Celeste S. See example 8.2. 8.2, profile of a change leader. Lebov sees the linguistic innovator as the ultimate sociable being, and Celeste S is his prototype. Celeste, not her real name, is the hub that joins different groups on Clark Street in Kensington, Philadelphia. Everybody can name her. She scores at the top of communication indexes in the wider neighborhood as well as her own block. Celeste grew up in Philadelphia during the 30s and 40s. Despite a strict father, she would scheme her way out of the house to dances at the local servicemen's canteen during the war. She knows how to look after her own interests. She is verbally adept in negotiation, persuasion, denunciation. She is the person who takes up the collection for flowers for a neighbor's funeral, even for a mean old lady she disliked. She is also the one who chased an enemy down the street with a butcher's knife. For the two new big changes in the Philadelphia vowel system, the mouth and face diphthongs, Celeste is a leader in her generation, one of a handful of women whose sociolinguistic distinction displays both their history of nonconformity and upward mobility. Let's look and see what the conclusion of this puppy is, guys. Oh. Summary. Mean old lady in a textbook is rare, right, Chi? Age, together with gender, is the most fundamental social factor structuring any study of language variation. Age is not controlled by, as an aside, Chichikana, what I want to laugh at is what the mean old lady must have been like when Celeste was born in 1935. The mean old lady must have really been old. Oh, thank you, Chi. That's so nice. I really appreciate it. Age is not controlled by chronological time. It has social, cultural, and psychological dimensions. The concept of the lifespan recognizes identifiable, socially constructed age stages. In age-graded speech, at any one time, different age groups behave differently, but each generation repeats the same pattern as the previous one. To track language change, we use apparent time, recording older and middle-aged speakers as linguistic archives for their generations. But telling the difference with certainty between age grading and generational change requires real-time data. Which one's a good point, Chi? Trend restudies of the same population show that original apparent time interpretations tend to be confirmed in real time. Apparent time assumes people continue to speak similarly throughout their adult lives. Panel restudies of the same speakers show that while a majority do remain stable, a large minority may still be changes. About the lady being old in the 30s? Yeah. Hey Jen, how you doing? In the study of language change, phonology has been most researched, while quantitative research in syntax, morphology, and discourse has been mainly confined to easily delimitable features. A qualitative case study shows that the language of news has changed markedly in the past century, with technological change helping promote changes in news languages. You're just in time, Jen. We haven't seen Orion yet. We've heard him crunching. Wolf definitely heard him crunching. You got home from work and a few errands? Speakers are aware of some changes, but not others. Change from above the level of consciousness is also led from above in society. It's the second Minnesota goodbye, y'all. But most changes are unconscious and come from the middle of the social hierarchy. Jen, I'm so excited. I am less than 200 hours until my monetization. So it shouldn't be much more than 2 weeks if we're lucky. Gender is the most significant factor in language change. Women lead in both conscious and unconscious change, creating Lebov's gender paradox. But the Milroys argue that it is women's usage that confers prestige on a change. Lebov identifies the leaders of change as women who combine nonconformity with upward mobility and have strong networks both in their neighborhood and beyond. We are getting close to that party time. Good night, Evie. Sleep well, dear. Sleep really well. It is getting late. The linguistic market sees different language codes as commodities with different social values. Speakers are ranked by how important the standard language is to their occupation. The analysis of social networks maps personal or group relationships in order to understand behavior. The Milroys found 3 working-class communities in Belfast were differentiated by their networks, which affected their participation in language change. Weak network ties carry change between groups, the Milroys conclude, while strong ties reinforce existing norms. Interesting. Lebov's term leader covers two roles: the innovators who are socially marginalized and the earlier adopters who are central and spread the change. Eckert's ethnography of Belton High in Detroit shows jocks and burnouts operating with conflicting ideologies, norms, practices, and trajectories. There are different rules for girls' purity compared with boys' toughness. You have an appointment with yourself for a work-funded dinner? Well, enjoy. Much love to you, Chi. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope to see you again soon. We are going to plan that monetization party here pretty quick. So don't forget, it'll show up. Jocks and burnouts function as communities of practice in which members' engagement in a joint enterprise leads to a shared repertoire. The focus on practice, what members do together, links the micro with the macro, the individual and social class. Linguistic changes led by flamboyant style leaders who create sociolinguistic meaning through their extreme usages. The C of P is particularly used in the community of practice is particularly used in gender language research. You are invited to the party. No need to invite yourself. Everyone is invited. Well, most everyone. I think we've already blocked the people who aren't invited. Okay, let's see if we have any more of these definitions that are helpful in the last 10 minutes here. Panel study is a longitudinal study in which researchers study the same sample of individuals over an extended period of time. For example, every 5 years, a kind of real-time study. The study of the Queen of England shifting vowel targets over the decades. It is an example panel study of a single individual. Obviously, such studies are a methodological nightmare for many reasons. Oh, this is a good one. Periphrastic. Using more than one word, often a function word, to express something that can often be expressed with an inflection. For example, the school's windows, the possessive is indicated by the inflection S. This is often referred to as the synthetic genitive versus the windows of the school. The possessive is indicated by an of phrase, refers to as the periphrastic or analytic genitive. Lovely. You guys going to remember that? The periphrastic genitive. In the Romance languages, the use of the combination go plus verb would be a periphrastic construction because it is used instead of marking the future on the same verb with a suffix. English doesn't have the synthetic inflectional option because we have no true future tense. That is a single grammaticalized form that marks the future. Instead, we use the modal will or the expression going to indicate the future. Yeah, English is weird. No future tense. Apparent time study. Study in which one samples comparable individuals of different generations at a given time, assuming that each group's behavior has not changed across the lifespan and can thus be taken as a linguistic archive. Thus, we might have samples of individuals 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 4, etc. Most of Lebovian variationist research involves apparent time studies. Age grading. Linguistic behavior changes as people age. For example, the use of profanity appears to be age graded with adolescents and young adults using it more often than older adults do, or at least this has been the case in the past. The use of like as a discourse marker
also seems to be age-graded, with younger people using it more often. Over time, the pattern holds. Generational change. The result of language change in progress. Each generation speaks differently. If Palin's parents did distinguish between deal and dill, then we'd have a case of generational change. Older Southerners, black and white, all distinguished between dawn and dawn, naught and not, caught and caught. But younger ones don't always, depending on where they live. You also see this referred to as change in progress. Estuary English is an English accent associated with the southeast, especially the area along the Thames River and estuary in England. Studies have indicated that estuary English is not a single coherent form of English. Rather, it consists of some, but not all, phonetic features of working class London speech, spreading at various rates socially into middle class speech and geographically into other accents of southeastern England. Note the distinction being made here. Accent involves phonetics, phonology, while dialect involves matters of morphology and syntax. The late Diana, Princess of Wales, spoke what was then estuary English, if you remember how she spoke. In short, it is socially marked. It is a socially marked, prestigious form of British English influenced by the language of the lower classes. This latter influence makes estuary English sound not quite as posh or snobby as regular upper middle class British English, which would be moving towards RP. Note that such changes are changes from below. Speakers aren't aware of what's going on. Oh yeah, have fun at the org, Chi. Are you, well, she's probably already gone. I wanted to ask her if she was going to live stream it. RP, or received pronunciation, the accent of standard English in the United Kingdom, with a relationship to regional accents similar to the relationship in other European languages between their standard varieties and their regional forms. Thank you, Sun. Thank you, Red. Hold on. Let me get to where I can make that work. Okie dokie. Subscribed. Thank you, Red. Ooh, third Minnesota goodbye, y'all. RP is defined in the Concise England Oxford English Dictionary as the standard accent of English as spoken in the south of England, although it can be heard from native speakers throughout England and Wales. Peter Trudgill estimated that in 1974 that 3% of the people in Britain were RP speakers. Although nothing intrinsic about RP marks it as superior to any other variety, sociolinguistic factors have given RP particular prestige in parts of Britain. It has thus been seen as the accent of those with power, money, and influence, though it has in recent times been perceived negatively by some associated with undeserved privilege. Since the 60s, greater permissiveness towards regional English varieties has taken hold in education. The study of RP is concerned exclusively with pronunciation, whereas Standard English, the Queen's English, Oxford English, and BBC English are also concerned with matters such as grammar, vocabulary, and style. An individual using RP will typically speak Standard English, although the reverse is not necessarily true. The standard language may be pronounced with a regional accent, such as a Yorkshire accent, but it is very unlikely that someone speaking RP would use it to speak the Yorkshire dialect. Some other observations about RP. RP is so called because it was the pronunciation that was received, that is, acceptable, at the court when dealing with the ruler. We have nothing comparable to this in the US. In other words, RP is very clearly defined. All you need to do is check out Daniel Jones' English Pronouncing Dictionary and its republication under a variety of names. There is no real regional variation in RP, or theoretically shouldn't be, though there are differences and varieties of British English spoken by educated individuals. This accent is also called BBC English, with reference to the accent, though since the 1970s in particular, one hears many regional accents on the BBC, as well as accents associated with indigenized varieties of English, for example, Nigerian English. Prior to this time, one generally did not, or if you did, you knew the person speaking was not well educated. During the period prior to the 70s, RP was also taught and enforced, at least in theory, in schools. So regardless of the accent of English you spoke at home, you were taught RP at school. Many people who can speak RP don't unless they're in contexts where they have to. Keith Walters tells a story of having visited Peter Trudgill in the mid-1980s and going to tea in the Commons Room at the University of Norwich, where he then taught following a lecture. That's what you do at British institutions. Go to tea in the afternoon in the Commons Room. Afterward, Keith asked him how many of his colleagues and students were speaking RP during the lecture or in the Commons Room. He replied, "None. Those educated in England all could have, or could have closely approximated it. However, they didn't, because to do so would have been seen as putting on airs. They were all highly educated and sounded highly educated, but they weren't using RP." Big Chief, how you doing? It's good to see you. We are just getting ready to close up, so you got here just in time. It is 4:20 somewhere. It is definitely past 4:20 here. I am done with the reading. My brain has started to hurt. So I am going to take a break and say hi to y'all for 5 minutes or so before I have to leave. What is new in the world? Anything interesting happened today? Big Chief, are you doing better? I've been actually worried about you, man. Really worried about you. I hope you're doing okay. And you have been in my prayers that it gets better. Yeah. Chichikana says she is going to go protest the org in Santa Rosa here soon. Did she say Santa Rosa? You're good? I'm really, really glad. I'm really, really glad. I think she said Santa Rosa. Yeah, Santa Rosa. I was right. She's in Santa Rosa. So that is really cool. I'm excited to see her shut down the mission in Santa Rosa. Boy, I'm trouble with my S's. So, I didn't get to see much of the internet today because I worked and then I came home and had meetings. And then I've been with you guys. I saw Nora did a live that looked really interesting. I'm going to have to listen to it later. Is there anything else that I should make sure and check out tonight before tomorrow? Mandy is in Disneyland, which is really exciting. She went can't hold my smoke. It is the worst thing. One of these days I'll get over it. My pour, look at my pour. It's almost empty. It is almost empty. Nothing on SPTV, huh? Well, dang. Dang, dang. Although, quiet days are good here and there. I don't know, it's gray and rainy and miserable here. So, okay, guys. It is just about 6 o'clock. I've got to get the youngest to a concert. Hope that her scratchy throat is going to feel better. She took an antihistamine. We're hoping it's just allergies. And I'm going to take off and check on her and get ready for the concert. And I will see you guys. I may not see you guys tomorrow. Thank you, Red. Thank you for being here. I may not see you guys tomorrow. I have to be at work at 5:45 tomorrow morning, and I work until 1:30, and then I've got class from 2 to 4. And then I think I've got something after that, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to be tired. So, maybe not tomorrow, but definitely Thursday and Friday. And I am going to get out and protest this weekend, hopefully on Sunday. So, anyhow, we will see you at some point. Thanks for coming and hanging out at the corner joint, y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. There was something interesting. And I will see you all later. Check it later. Bye bye.